My name is Drew Page, and today I'm going to show you how to build a free HTTP status code checker using Google Sheets and AppScript with Google. Let's get into it. So the first thing to note here is that all of these projects are going to be living in my GitHub account under Atomaway. So the thought process here is that I'm getting these tedious, repetitive tasks out of my way with automation. So today we're going to build the HTTP status code checker, and I'm going to jump right into it. Really what we're going to build is this: you take in a URL and it returns the status code of that HTTP request. So really there's going to be two ways that we're going to build this. The first is a formula. So as you can see here in the formula field, I created this custom formula, takes in a URL as input in this referencing that cell, and it returns the status code. The drawback to this is if you were to come back to this sheet, it would rerun these formulas, and therefore the status code would be checked again. And that can just slow down your sheet if you have a ton of these URLs. So one thing that we do at work in the SEO and content space is doing like link evaluations for a backlink profile. And if you have thousands of URLs to check, that could slow down the process. So the second way I'm going to do it is using a custom menu where it calls the get HTTP status, and then it just inputs the response as a string and won't rerun unless you manually do that. So the class we're going to use is URL fetch app, and I'll drop links to everything I've already talked about in the description below. And we're going to return the status code. So in the Mozilla docs, there's a bunch of status codes. So 200 is good. It's okay. That means it's returning what is expected. Obviously, the most common, 302 not found, 404 not found. There's some funny ones too, like I'm a teapot, 418. I've yet to come across that one, but I'm hoping to someday. Cool. So starting from a new sheet, blank spreadsheet, I'm just gonna paste in the title, free HTTP status code checker. I'm also gonna grab the URLs that I have here because I know the status codes of some of these. So that's helpful to check, because one of the things you might run into, and we're about to get into it, so let me just open the extensions AppScript. That creates a new AppScript project, and we are going to start with the formula. So I'm going to rename this function. Actually, I'm going to rename the project because that can sometimes throw it off if you need to authorize. It's nice to have a description of what the project is that's asking for authorization. So function, I'm going to rename it to HTTP status, which is what you may have seen in the formula. I do all caps. I think that's what Google recommends. And it's going to take the input, the URL as input. We're going to create a try and catch. I like to catch the error. You can put that as, you can log it to, so logger.log is like the console. So error fetching URL, and then interpolate the string, error.messages, I believe. Just message, error.message. But I'm also going to return the same string so that it potentially, it'll put it in the field if it failed to return the URL or the status code. And then in the try block, we're going to let the response equal to, this is where the URL fetch app.fetch comes in, and that's from that class that is available to us via the AppScript from Google. going to take in the input, and then we're going to get the response code. So you might think, oh great, this works. This is done, except we have to return the response. I like to put it as a string just to make sure that it's going to return properly. But let's see what happens, because I know this is a 301 because Angel rebranded. So take the string in, and it says 200. And the reason for that, because I know that this redirects to well found. You need to follow the redirects. So in the documentation here, there's advanced parameters, and what we're gonna use is the follow redirects, which is a boolean, and a mute HTTP exceptions. Set follow redirects to false because the default is true, and then we're gonna set mute HTTP exceptions to false. I'm sorry, to true. Yeah, to true. So in the fetch call, you add in another object with mute HTTP exceptions, set to true, and follow redirects set to false. And now when we go back, it should, when I save, you'll see the orange dot indicates that the file has not been saved since the last update. It's 301, which is what we expected. And now you should be able to drag down and get those responses, which are 200 for well found, because again, they redirected angel.co to well found using a 301 permanent redirect. So the well found is a 200, okay, status. I put in a random Google URL, which is a 404 because it's just a string of numbers. And then I, again, made a MailChimp 404. But now I'll show you how to do that same process using a different method, which is to create a menu and have it input automatically. So let's get into that. The first thing to do is something you'll see a lot in my videos, is an onOpen function. That's how you use the spreadsheet app to get the UI. So we're gonna get the Google UI and we're gonna create a menu. And I'm just gonna put HTTP status code or status checker. And then we're gonna add an item, get HTTP status, and I like to put in brackets what you're asking the user to highlight. You can highlight one URL or many, and this comes in handy when you have a bunch of different formulas in one sheet. This kind of makes it clear to the user what you want them to highlight. And then you need to add it to the UI. And that should now work when you refresh. Oh, sorry, you're gonna also, so you add the item with the title, and we're gonna write a function called get HTTP status. So I'm gonna copy that, and it's a string. You put it in a string. You might think, oh, why it should be a function, so I'll just put it in as a function name. It's a string. So cool. We're gonna first get some helper of like, what is the spreadsheet get active sheet, so that we know we're attaching this function to the sheet that we're currently on and not some other sheet which you could reference as well. And we're going to get the row. We're going to call that sheet. We're going to get the active cell. We're going to get row. I think get row or get row index, that works too. Let's do that. We're going to get the column. Column. close that off. And then we're going to get the URLs, which is going to be sheet.getActiveRange.getValues. So that's going to return, I believe, an array of values. So we're going to create a for loop. I'm going to let I, which is going to be the index, equal to 0. I is less than urls.length, I++. And now we're going to basically recreate our try and catch. So let me just finish the catch. As I mentioned, I like to do that. I guess I could just copy this in. We don't really need the logger unless you want it. And I'm going to also copy this, actually just the response. Because now we need to, and actually we need to make some modifications here. So instead of the input, which we fed into the formula, we're going to use URLs. We're going to take the ith index, and that actually is, it's like a array within an array. I don't know if it's a tensor. And we're going to grab just the first one because it should only have one URL in each of those nested arrays. So that should work to get the response. But then we're going to take the sheet, which we referenced earlier, get range. And so what get range, you'll see the description here, it looks for you to tell it what row and what column to get. And so we're going to use the row plus I. And I'll make a distinction in a second on how that works. And then we're going to take, so row plus I looks at the index that we're currently on within our list of URLs. So it goes down the list. And the column, we're going to want to put the response in the column to the right. And so we're going to set value, and I'm going to use these the strings to then just return the response. Cool. So save that, go back over to your sheet. I believe you'll notice the menu's not there. If you see it's not there, refresh. It does close out your app script. So I like to immediately open that back up just in case we need to debug something. But you'll notice that menu was added. And then I'm just going to try it on one. This is where the authorization is required, and that's where that name comes in handy. So it says the HTTP status code checker, allow it, unless you don't trust me. And that returned 301, which I actually don't recall if that's what we were looking for. So let's see if this works. So another thing to note, and why I said you take the row plus I, and you should always, at least in this scenario, drag from the top down. There might be a better way to do this, and if you know of one, please comment to share with me, and I can make an update in a future video. But I like to do it this way, and it should return. So yeah, angel.co 301s to well-found, which is 200. This is a 404. And I believe MailChimp, because they don't have the dub here. So let's see what happens is this the formula one? No. Let's try this. We'll add dub. And I'll do the HTTP status on that. And hopefully that's a 302. Which, let's remind me what a 302 is. I should know. Found. Okay. All right, we're good. Hopefully this is helpful. If you want more of these tutorials on automation, please, leave a comment, thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the future video. Thanks. And one more thing to note on the current quotas for running the HTTP status code, the URL fetch apparently has 20,000 per day. Hopefully you don't run into that constraint. if you pay for a Google Workspace account, that's 100,000 a day. But there are some like other limitations worth noting, that like fetch headers says 100 per call. I feel like I did run into that limitation in a project, so that might be worth noting, or trying to figure out what that entails on like how to break it up into separate calls.